Like whenever I would talk about the Indian politics, you know, they waste so much time on the culture war and the anti-China stuff, And then I'm like, man, I can't even get the electricity on time, like every day. And I live in the Silicon Valley of India.
I know.
Yeah, and there's so many such basic problems, And so India should be focusing on that rather than, trying to schmooze with the US and say, hey, yeah, let's draw a war plan to attack China and to start World War III. It's like, where are the priorities, guys?
You're right about that. And I tell you, we're actually live recording now, but even before the intro, but I like something that you just said there is something that I actually wanted to address with the audience. But again, good day, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. This is episode 57, and we're joined by a repeat guest. His name is S.L. Kanthan. You all probably know him by now, Mr. Geopolitics himself. And he hails, right now he's in Bangalore, India, and he has a tech background, and he covers a lot of things geopolitics. We've had him on episode 36 and episode 50. So I encourage my audience to go back and watch those episodes and kind of get up to par with what we've been discussing this last 6 months with SL. Just there's a lot of new developments going on in the world, and that's kind of going to be an opening question that I have for Mr. Kanthan. But I just wanted to say welcome to the show and thanks for coming back again.
Thank you. I'm always glad to be with you, Kiko.
Yes, I'm so glad that we met, and I'm very happy that I reached out to you when I did reach out to you, because I've told my audience before that I don't post things besides just videos of just like my own forum on Twitter. And SL, Amir Napier, and a few other people, Jack Rasmus, I interviewed episode 56. There have been some great, solid informational sources on Twitter, even though there is a lot of arguing, toxicity, fighting. There are people who are trying to be truth seekers and spread narratives that sort of make us question things. And that's the whole point of the forum. Is Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum is to make you develop your own mind. It's not for me to tell you how to think. It's for you to form the ability to take in different perceptions and consider different points of view, and not just jump to conclusions and fight with people because they have a disagreement with you about an issue. And we kind of talked about that the last episode when SL said we need to start thinking in fractions. And you may need to trademark that, my friend, because I think that's a great way to look at the world. This is a complex world. This is a multipolar world. We're talking about billions of people, over 200 countries in the world. So we're really in this together. And that's the message that I want to push with the forum. And just as a slight advertisement before we go into the discussion, I want to say that we have reached over 75 different countries on the forum in just a little bit over a year. So there is power in information, there's power in communication, there's power in connecting to different types of people. And so beautiful people, keep that in mind, that we're in this together. We're not separate. We're always going to be collaborating, economy, culturally, socioeconomically. You can't separate the people in the world from each other. But I want to ask you, SL, can you address an issue? Because you're one of the guests, you're very popular. You are very popular, but you do have some haters. And I don't understand the hate, but you kind of mentioned that before we got into the introduction. Why do people just assume that you talk about China, you're a representative of China, but when you talk on the forum, when we've discussed things, we rarely talk about China on the forum. We talk about everybody and everything. So how do we clear these misconceptions up? Is that just their only defense, is to say that this guy represents China, or do they just not try to consider your point of view?
So I guess I do tweet more about China than about other countries. But I would tweet about the events happening all over the world, you know. So if there is the coup in Niger in Africa, I would tweet about it. I would talk about U.S. politics, Europe, Asia, Russia. You know, so I write. The columns for Sputnik, which is the Russian magazine. You know. So, but for some reason, but nobody calls me the Putin puppet. You know, like even. but but when I say positive things about China, oh my God, people go nuts. You know. So part of the reason, but this shows the power of propaganda. You know. So people just cannot. I mean, like people have been brainwashed so much that when they hear someone say positive things about China, they start having like this mental trauma. You know, they're like, hold on, because I have listened to 10,000 hours of the YouTube videos about how bad China is. So I believe deep inside all these things I have heard. And then there is this guy who says, oh, China has beautiful bullet trains, China has beautiful libraries, they did this, they did that, they are doing well in science and with technology. And they're like, okay, so there are only two possibilities. Will either will all the 10,000 hours of the YouTube videos that I have watched, they're all wrong, or this guy must be a friend of the CCP, you know? So, you know, but this is the thing, you know, so people should say, okay, all right, he says something positive. And so let me take that and let me look into that. Is it factual? You know, and if it's factual, then they both could be true. You know, the YouTube video could be true, and I could be true. You know, so for example, like so if so so I have a friend from San Francisco. You know, and back in those days, so whenever he said that he's from San Francisco, the first question people would ask is, "Oh, so are you gay?" Because
Really?
San Francisco, yeah, because San Francisco is full of gay people, you know. So, so so it's like that's the perspective. What sort of the information do you get about a certain thing? So well, you can say San Francisco has a lot of gay people. San Francisco has a lot of the technology companies. San Francisco has a lot of beautiful parks. San Francisco has these amazing the roads that go up and down. Or San Francisco is, has a lot of drug addicts, but they're all true, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So when one person he talks about the beautiful parks, well, you don't have to attack him and say, "Oh, well, you're a propaganda because I know there are a lot of drug addicts on the streets in San Francisco." Well, they both are true,
Mm-hmm.
you
That's a
know.
nice way. That's a great analogy too. I like that analogy. Yeah, I appreciate that disclosure too, because people are just I think a lot of it is because it comes down to self-reflection. And this platform, I question my own views. Like I'm constantly changing and challenging myself because you have to, because there's when you meet different types of people, you have different perspectives. And so you have to consider different points of view. That's the whole point. Otherwise, you're talking to yourself. And I think a lot of these people that attack you and other people and similar minded people like myself, they don't even try to give it a second look. Because they've been so brainwashed going in, and they can never see that what they've been taught, they have so much baggage, and they don't want to criticize their own information that they've taken in over the years because of who they maybe associate with. And it really just discourages this segregation of dialogue. And so we do the opposite. We try to engage different audiences to come to conclusions because, like you said before, the ruling class can only do what we allow them to do when it comes to having our own minds and stuff. As long as we listen to what the ruling class tells us to do, they're going to continue to divide and conquer us. I mean, that's what they want us to do, is to fight amongst each other. And you would think that that's a basic premise, but people don't seem to understand it's just that simple.
Yeah, so if somebody asks me, what are 5 positive things about Trump? Then I can list 5 positive things. And if somebody asks me, what are 5 positive things about Biden? Then I can still list them,
Wow, you're good.
Yeah, so I don't have this sort of ideological fervor that one thing must be all good and one thing must be all bad, So I say a lot of bad things about the U.S. Foreign policies and the predatory capitalism, So some people, they wrote to me on with Twitter. They're like, "Why do you hate America?" I'm like, no, I don't hate America. And then I wrote a long list of things, 15 things I really will admire about the U.S. And that's me. And I think yeah, and I think like you said, the ruling class, they want us to be trapped in bubbles and boxes, and it doesn't do us any good, and it doesn't do our families and the communities and the countries any good, So, if you really care about your country, don't get boxed into Republican or Democrat,
Absolutely. Well, the audience is probably wondering when are they going to start talking about some issues now? But I want to get some of that stuff set straight because out of all my guests, SL and Norm Finkelstein came on the show a couple of months ago, and
oh,
Norm,
wow.
Norm, I believe he was episode 47 or 48. I don't know. I've done so many interviews now, but you'll have to go back and look at the archives of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. Get your friends and family to subscribe. A lot of people watch the content, but a lot of people don't subscribe to the channel and watch the videos and like the stuff on the YouTube channel. So I've really been lately, the last few episodes, pushing that because we have quite a big audience, but it's not as reflected in the numbers. But just subscribe for free. I'm not, everything you see is going to be free. It's not behind a paywall or anything. But we get all types of people on, and the hate that you got, I was like, wow, why is that even, how's that justified? You know what I mean? You're very popular on the other end, but I guess with the popularity, because you really gotten popular on Twitter too, you always get the haters coming in. When you get more exposure, there are going to be more people like, oh, who's this person? Like that. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with that. You have like 100 positive people, and then you have like 2 or 3 negative people thrown in that are just very intense trolls. And so it gives them the perception that a lot of people are like hating on SL, but you got nothing but love from here, from the forum, from me to you. But I want to talk about some of the events that are happening now. You did open up with a very interesting comment, and you said that in the next 10 years, you only see just acceleration in these events, with just constant war, constant economical destabilization, constant fighting, but also coalition building. We talked about BRICS the last episode. We just had the BRICS, the 15th Summit in South Africa, and now we're having the G20 in India. So there's a lot of overlap there. I want to get your view on what you took from the not the G20, but the BRICS Summit? What was your biggest takeaway from that 15th summit in the BRICS?
Sure. I think this is the game changer. I think the BRICS event, it really changed the direction of the world. Because so let's go back. So BRICS is the 5 countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So South Africa was added in 2010. So the BRICS was, the BRIC was just an acronym that was coined by the Goldman Sachs guy in 2001. And he said, yeah, and he just said, hey, these 4 countries, as a group, if you look at their the collective GDP and so on, they're going to be significant, but he never recommended those countries to come together because they're all so far away, right? Far away from each other, and they don't have a whole lot in common. But when the 2008 financial crisis happened, then there was sort of like an awakening, saying, hold on, the collective West is running a Ponzi scheme. This is all just a bubble after bubble. And it was so shocking to hear that the US was on the verge of going bankrupt. And the US had to go to China to beg for $700 billion. It was all like very shocking. And then those 4 got together in 2009. And then the following year, they added South Africa. But then they didn't do a whole lot. They just sat on their asses once a year, meeting for the kumbaya and saying hello. And then in 2015, they started the New Development Bank, which was supposed to be the alternative for the World Bank and the IMF. But then it didn't do a whole lot, and the New Development Bank was still dealing in US dollars, So it did not really change the dynamics. And then we fast forward to 2022, there was the Ukraine war, and it was followed by this shock and awe sanctions by the US and the EU. And they put like 10,000 sanctions on Russia, and at a drop of a hat, all the Western corporations, they left Russia. Russia was kicked out of SWIFT, the financial institution for global transactions. And then the biggest shocking thing was they stole like $400-500 billion of foreign exchange reserves of Russia. So when Russia sells oil, gas, whatever, they get paid in dollar and the euro. And obviously, those dollars and the euros, they stay in the American banks and the European banks, So, and there was a trust, that that will never be weaponized, because whatever war we have, whatever squabbles we have, that should be separate from the financial stuff, But the US and the EU, they violated that very fundamental trust, and they tried to make Russia into like North Korea, and it's really scary, right? For one, they have, so Russia is has 1,000 years of history.
Talking about Russia's 1,000-year history. I'm here with.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're
I mean, as you
fine.
can see, yeah. So we lost the electricity again.
I saw that, yeah.
So yeah, and they just forget the history of who Russia is, and they just like portray the mainstream media is like portrays it in like the cartoonish way,
Yeah.
Oh, Putin the dictator, Russia is nothing but a gas station, blah blah, And so if you look at, I mean, like if you go back in like the 19th century and so on, the Russians had some of the world's best mathematicians, the physicists, and the chemists. I mean, the periodic table that we see with all the chemicals, that was made by a Russian. So they were very smart people. And but during the Cold War, Russia was the first one to go to space. They were the first one to send a dog to the space, the first man to the space, the first spacewalk, blah blah. And so now they have, I mean, the hypersonic missiles that the U.S. doesn't have, So and so on. So I mean, and Russia is the largest country in the world. Well, in terms of the area, it's like I don't know, like but twice as large as the U.S. And so when the world saw what the U.S. was doing to Russia, like as if it was Venezuela or North Korea, they were shocked, And what happened immediately was the concept of BRICS expansion. And astoundingly, 43 countries applied for membership with BRICS. It's just like shocking, because if you listen to the U.S. politicians, but everybody hates Putin, and America is like this freedom, Santa Claus of freedom and democracy, and everybody wants to be with America. And then 43 countries wanted to join BRICS. It was just like mind blowing. And so some of the countries, like India, were afraid of such a rapid expansion. So, India wanted only 3 members, and China wanted like, I don't know, 15, 20. So then Russia negotiated, and they settled on 6 new members. But guess what? The 6 new members, but 3 are from the Middle East, but 2 are from Africa, and 1 from South America. So it's like very inclusive. And the shocking thing is, the 3 of the new members from the Middle East, that includes Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran. Okay? And well, all 3 have lots of oil, lots of natural gas, right? And they are going to be combined with Russia. So now this makes BRICS the powerhouse of gas and oil in the world. So the BRICS Plus, so now accounts for almost 50% of the oil production, 50% of the natural gas reserves, 60% of the coal, with 33%. I mean, with 30% of the world's GDP. Like there are just so many big numbers, you know. And if you look at the other two countries from Africa, one is Egypt, and then the other is Ethiopia. If you look at South America, now both Brazil and Argentina are now a member of the BRICS Plus, and they have tons of natural resources and the agricultural resources like soy, corn, the two things that China needs to feed its the animals, you know. So, so this new BRICS Plus. So one of the conditions in joining BRICS Plus is to say that they will not will engage in sanctions on other countries. Right. So this gives guarantees for Russia to sell its oil and gas, and this gives China the peace of mind that it's going to always get oil, gas, soybeans, and corn, and all this stuff. You know, so it's really win-win, and but especially for China and Russia. You know, who are the targets of the globalists, you know. So this is a huge win. And more interestingly, it's not going to stop, you know. And they have this other 40 people who are waiting in line to join the BRICS Plus. So in 2024, there will be like maybe about 10, 15 more people will be admitted. You know, and the two other huge ramifications is that they're all going to try their best to trade in local currencies as much as possible. You know, so say for example, you are Kiko, the country, I'm the SL, the country, you know, and I buy $1,000 worth of the computers from you, and you buy $1,000 of food, you know, from me, you know, from India. So, but typically, what happens is that I ship you in January $1,000 worth of rice, and you send me a check for $1,000. And then in like September, I would say, hey, Kiko, can you send me a laptop for $1,000? Then I have to wire you $1,000, and then you send me the laptop, right? So in both of these cases, we have to go through the U.S. banks, and they will take the commission, and they will know what we are doing. You know, they will know what I'm buying from you, how much I'm paying from you. And if I do something that the American banks don't like, they will either freeze my money and or they will say, well, you can't trade with Kiko anymore. You know, and that's the end of it, you know. So that was the traditional, the mode for the last few decades since World War II. But now the BRICS countries say, well, hold on. You know, so if you're going to send rice and if you're going to get back a laptop, why not just do it in the local currencies, you know? So, so you send me the laptop and I send you 1,000, I mean, so I send you, say, 100,000 rupees of, you know, my currency. And so you are not afraid of holding on to that 100,000 rupees because you know that I'm going to buy something from you in the future, you know? So you just hold on to it for a few months, and we have a good trust, you know? So you and I are friends, so you know that I'm going to buy something from you. So you are not worried about us holding on to the Indian rupee. And then 4 or 5 months later, I'm going to buy a laptop from you, and oh, sorry. Then you are going to buy some rice from me. So you call me up and you go, hey, SL, I want some rice, and I'm going to pay you in the rupees that you had sent me earlier for the laptop. So like if we have some trust, then we can do it in the local currencies. And that's the formula for the new BRICS Plus. So it's not going to fully eradicate the use of dollar, but it's going to be like we said, fractions. So this is going to be the fraction of de-dollarization. Okay, but if they really go through this, there will be a huge impact for the U.S. dollar. So, for example, I mean, finance is based on the marginal trade. So like even if the demand for the dollar goes down by 10-20%, it can have a significant impact on the value of dollar. And it's going to have a significant impact on the ability of the US government to print money like a madman, So just this year, I mean, in the last, so when was the debt ceiling drama in the US? Like in June, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So since then, the US government has borrowed something like $2 trillion of debt. What is this madness? I mean, where is that $2 trillion going to? I mean, did you, Kiko, get like a $5,000 check from the government saying, "Hello, Mr. Kiko, we borrowed $2 trillion and we would, so it's like a huge, scam. It's like a hoax, okay? So they borrow $2 trillion and the rich people, they give it to one another. They give the $2 trillion to their buddies and buddies of Nancy Pelosi and buddies of whoever the Republican leader is, Yeah, so that ability to print the monopoly money, it's basically, fraudulent, So that will go away. So, in summary, the BRICS Plus means it will be the inability of the US to sanction other countries. It will mean de-dollarization, and it will mean security and strengthening for the rivals of the US, especially Russia, China, and Iran, And also, the US is losing the stranglehold on its, vassals like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And they both have like huge military bases, And so you know what Saudi Arabia is doing now? It's like inviting Huawei, the Chinese company. Huawei or Huawei. So Huawei is doing the cloud computing and 5G and the telecom infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. Okay. Now, why would the Saudis do that? Okay, but think about that for a second. I mean, because the U.S. Hates Huawei. The U.S. went all around Europe and they made the Europeans stop all the Huawei projects. The U.S. Banned Huawei, and they will impose tremendous amount of sanctions. Oh, so there is one more good news about Huawei, and we will come to that.
No. This is important.
Yeah. So this is really shocking when you think about that. There's no need for Saudi Arabia to piss off the U.S. and go buy Huawei, right? They could have just said, okay, we will buy the Nokia, the Ericsson, and we will use the American companies like Cisco, Google to do everything, the Amazon clouds. So there's only one reason for Saudi Arabia to go out of its way to use Huawei for the 5G. Okay, and that's to stop spying by the US. Because all the Western equipment like Nokia, the Ericsson, Cisco, they all have to provide a backdoor to the NSA, the CIA, whoever. So this shows that Saudi Arabia is venturing on a brand new path, on its own sovereign path.
I was reading one of your tweets about Huawei, and that is, you make a good point about Saudi Arabia, because you talked about the petrodollar connection the last time we spoke. We have not only overlap, and we'll get to some later with the G20 Summit that's going on now in India, but you have all the BRICS, the original 5 BRICS countries that are part of the G20 already. But then you also have overlap with countries that are joining the BRICS January the 1st, 2024. Like you mentioned, you already mentioned Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, UAE, with very petroleum-based economies. And I guess the question I have for you actually I have a clarification before I have a question. You cut off when you talked about Egypt and Ethiopia. What did those 2 countries in specific offer to this new BRICS alliance?
Sure. So, Egypt is very strategic for many reasons. One, it controls, the Suez Canal. So there's a huge strategic thing. It's where like most of the world's trade, they have to go through the Suez Canal. And the number 2, well, Egypt has a huge military, the largest like in Africa. And also like the strategic the positioning in the Mediterranean Sea. And then it's also a Muslim country. So it gives China the credibility, because the US is like, the Chinese are committing genocide of Muslims. So when China has a lot of Muslim friends like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Also, by the way, but China was the one that brought Saudi Arabia and Iran together. Okay, so the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Arabs and the Persians. So the Chinese have built a lot of the goodwill in the Middle East. So they've made friends with all these strategic countries, and it's sort of like so I've never played this the video game, but supposedly there is the video game where you have to conquer the world by. Do you know the video game? It's supposedly like to conquer the world, but you have to go one piece at a time.
Oh gosh, I'm not much of a gamer, but I totally understand that there's a game out there that does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so but that's what it is, you know. So it's all strategic about, you know, like what are the choke points, which country has the military, which country has the energy, which country will help us in the UN vote, which can, you know, it's like a huge geopolitical, but three-dimensional chess game, you know.
No doubt.
And so, yeah. So the interesting thing is Saudi Arabia is looking east. You know, in December they brought Xi Jinping to Saudi Arabia, and the entire the Arab countries. So like with 20 Muslim leaders of various nations in that region, they flew to Saudi Arabia to meet with Xi Jinping, you know, and because China has a lot of things to offer, right? Like they're very practical people. They don't want to rule you. They don't bug you about democracy. You know, they're all like business people, you know. They're like, well, listen, let's make a deal for the next 30 years. You give us oil and gas for the next 30 years. We will build a railway through the desert. They've actually done that, you know. And we will do the impossible things for you, okay? Like we will build massive cities. We'll build you the biggest, the mosque, which they did, and like they do amazing things that we never hear about in the mainstream media, you know. So like they'll go to Zambia, they'll go to you know, Zimbabwe, you know, the countries in Africa that but nobody can point to in a map. Okay, and the Chinese will be there. They're like, we will give you $100 million to build this amazing, the hospital with like a world class surgery, and then we will, we'll take 1,000 doctors from Africa. We'll take them back to China. We'll train them for free. You know, things that the U.S. and Europe will never do. Okay, like they don't have the patience to build hospitals, schools, dams, railways, highways, seaports, airports. The Chinese, they provided free satellite TV to our 10,000 villages in Africa. Okay, so who else has done that? I mean, like, have you heard of France doing that? You know, France. They control the currency of so many countries in West Africa. You know, like I think 7 or about 10 countries in West Africa. They are forced to use the French currency. It's called the CFA, and they have to put all their gold reserves in France. You know, so they're basically puppets of France, and France gets to buy the uranium, gold, copper, tin, blah blah blah, for like pennies on the dollar. You know, and they don't do anything to these countries. You know, so China, they also benefit a lot from Africa, and they obviously get good deals. But they give something back to these societies. You know, they go and spend $1 billion on like these. Like hydropower dams, right? They're going to provide electricity to millions of Africans for not just one day, 1 year, but for like the next 50 years, right? It's like a huge transformation, you know? Uh, the US gives a lot of, the aid, but it doesn't help Africans become self-sufficient, self-sustainable, right? I mean, it's like you teach a man how to fish versus you give a man a fish, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so China does a lot of these uh, the projects that have long-term benefits, you know? Like they go to Baghdad and they build so many schools, public schools for kids, right? So that's the kind of stuff that is like turning a lot of these the developing countries but towards China and to work with China, you know. So for all of the China haters, yeah, they, you know, so maybe you don't like the freedom part or the social credit or the facial recognition, blah blah, you know. But the things that they do to advance the development, infrastructure, wages, healthcare, education, you know, that means a lot more to people in the developing countries.
Could you touch briefly on Ethiopia, because I thought that was an interesting inclusion in this alliance as well. Like you
Yeah,
said before, I like the emphasis that you placed on. It really just confirms what you've been saying about multipolarity. With now you have Africa, Middle East, South America. You have basically the global South, you know, together in one large conglomerate, but different prongs from that conglomerate. It's not just in one concentration, but it's spreading throughout the world.
yeah. So, you know, the most populous country in Africa is Nigeria, you know. So, well, ideally, the BRICS would have liked to get Nigeria, but they couldn't because the Nigerian president and the politicians are very pro-US. You
Really?
know, yeah. So I don't know about. I mean, like if you know the story, like the current the president of Nigeria so used to live in Chicago for a while. You know, and he made like millions of dollars. Okay, and so he just had a regular job, like making I don't know, you know, $50,000-$60,000 or so back in the days. But his bank account had millions of dollars. And then when they found out he was like working with drug dealers in Chicago, so then he left the U.S. and somehow managed to get those the millions of dollars back to Nigeria. And then he became very powerful in politics, and he's been the president for a long time, and he controls most of the things in Nigeria. So since they couldn't get Nigeria, BRICS Plus went with the second most populous country, which is Ethiopia. And it also has a strategic location on the Horn of Africa, you know, like where the traffic goes by. And the Ethiopians are also very hardworking, very smart, well-educated people. And they are willing to do like a lot of the manufacturing jobs, you know, that like maybe some other people don't want to do, you know. So if China wants to say start the car manufacturing plant in Africa, then well, Ethiopia would be a great you know place, you know, because they work very hard and they love this sort of stuff, you know. So it's a strategic long-term planning, and you know, plus they needed some black skin to show the world that BRICS Plus is fully inclusive, because if it's all like Russians and Chinese and Saudis, there's not a lot of, melatonin, So but there's probably some of that, hey, well, I have a black friend. I'm not racist.
That's
So
hilarious.
maybe there's some of that.
This episode is a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be because there's just so much information that you're giving to the audience, and it creates this. I had a question for you about which I will get to, about the governance of this BRICS alliance that's forming and expanding. Like you said, it really needs to be called BRICS Plus now, because it's not just the 5 anymore. We're going to have 11 by January the 1st. I'm intrigued, though. I thought about OPEC because we had Jack Rasmus on a few days ago, who's a U.S. economist. He's written a book called The Scourge of Neoliberalism. He's written lots of books that are pretty critical of the United States and towards the global economies. So I think you all have a great overlap of ideas, but I was thinking about it towards the end of our conversation with Jack Rasmus, episode 56. And you just mentioned Africa with Ethiopia and Egypt. The OPEC nations, you have Algeria, Angola, the Republic of the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon. You have Nigeria is an OPEC country. So could you see this OPEC body sort of crossing paths with the BRICS group? But like you mentioned, Nigeria has issues with Tinubu being the head of state, being U.S. friendly. But what about, do you see those countries just eventually becoming a part of the BRICS because of the petroleum basis?
Yeah, as your audience might know, there have been a series of coups in Africa, and all around Nigeria, like in Mali, Guinea, Burkina Faso, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and Gabon. And they're all were trying to kick the French and the colonialists out. And they want a brand new deal, And I think this will be the true, this could be the true liberation of Africa, There's like no freaking reason that Africa should be poor. Okay, Africa should be rich. Those people should be all driving a BMW there. Okay, they have so much oil and gas and gold and diamond and copper, cobalt, nickel. But I mean, whatever you name, but they've been getting the raw end of the deal, right? So moving forward, hopefully there will be some. So for example, like some countries like Nigeria are still puppets of the West, like they were ready to go to war with Niger, to please the French and the IMF and the World Bank. Can you believe that in like 2023, one African country waging a war against its neighbor on behalf of the imperialists who robbed and raped Africa for 500 years? I mean, what are these people even thinking? My God, it's like really shocking and sad, So, these tensions, they have to be resolved, and hopefully they can do it on their own, without a war, without the U.S., bombing, or like NATO bombing. So if they can resolve these things, then the sky is the limit. So for example, Nigeria has a lot of oil and gas, but they need the pipelines to go to the Mediterranean. So they have to go through Niger and then either to Morocco or to Algeria, So, I mean, if they all cooperate, there's a lot of benefits, And if you look at the countries like Guinea, it has the largest, the untapped mines of the iron ore, But it's very hard. It's in the remote jungle. It's behind all these the mountains and stuff. So they need help from the Chinese, who can bring these the mega machines that can drill a 10-mile hole through the mountains, and they can build the railways, highways, airports, blah blah blah. So all of the global South have to work together to make this happen. Well, ideally, the U.S. and the Europeans should also join this effort. But we are run by the neoliberals, the Wall Street type, who just want to make fast money, and but they don't want to help anybody. But they don't even want to help the Americans. Why would they want to help, help the Africans? So the global South has to get together, and more importantly, the Africans have to have a sense that, hey guys, we all belong to one continent. We're all one family. So regardless of the tribe, the language, the religion, we have to come together. Because if they don't have that sense, man, then people become pawns of the divide and rule. It's so easy, right? Then you pay one country to attack another country, and then they both are weak at the end, and then you would take over both. So I mean, yeah. So the next, and then, well, interestingly, some of these countries have also become the playground for the geopolitical struggle between the West and Russia and China. So the Russian, the mercenaries. So they used to be known as Wagner. I don't know if they have a brand new name. So the Wagner Group is very popular in some of these areas where the coups are happening. So this is so this could be Russia's way for the revenge. Because the Russians are like, hold on, well, you are turning Ukraine and Poland and some of the European countries against me. Really? Okay. So I'll go and screw up your colony, and I'm going to deprive you of these the colonies and the uranium and all this stuff. I'm going to make you, so I'm going to weaken you. So there's a lot of like this the proxy war going on.
I was thinking about what you said earlier with Iran, that negotiation that was going on between Russia, Iran, and China when it came to how many members were going to be joining this new BRICS Plus. Okay, so my major question, and I think I posed it the last episode, but before I ask the question, I urge my listeners to go back and listen to episode 36 with SL, where he explains multipolarity. Because I think if you understand multipolarity, even though there are things that had to be resolved, as he just mentioned, we have to sort of resolve the tensions and stuff before there can be a true multipolar world. I think it's important to go back and listen and watch that episode 36 to get a better understanding of what he means when he talks about the multipolar world, so people are up to par. And again, episode 50 continues, and now we're on episode 57. And make sure to subscribe to Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. How do we determine if the struggle of power between this BRICS Plus? Because it would be, I guess, a little naive to suggest that there's no sort of power there. It can't be that all the countries on the same plane, and maybe that's not the point. You have to have some kind of a negotiation factor because you have powerful countries, China, Russia, India is also thrown in there as well. I mean, India has as many people as China does. And we can talk about India some too, because I think India is a big part of this equation. There seems to be elements within Indian politics that maybe they don't coalesce as much as they could, I guess, to keep this thing going even more. And maybe that is because the U.S. relationship that they have, the relationship with the West, they're kind of getting pulled in different directions. I mean, we got a G20 going on in India as we speak. But how do these smaller countries within the BRICS Plus leverage that negotiation power when you have such superpowers already in the alliance?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I don't have, there's no simple answer because the BRICS is not like a formal a coalition. There's no like the constitution. There's no like, so for example, yeah, so there's no like the bullying power, so there's no like, I mean, the hierarchy, and there's no veto power, there's no hierarchy. So it's a very loose organization, and it has benefits and disadvantages, So the disadvantages are, obviously it's very hard to make a decision, so it could be hard to make a decision because everybody wants to do their own thing, and like you said, like, but there's nothing that really binds these countries together, and then there could also be all these the internal the rivalries that could spring up anytime, So, for example, Saudi Arabia and Iran, they're now trying to be friends, but they also have like 50, 60 years or maybe 1,000 years of baggage, the Sunni, Shiite, blah, blah. So that could rise up any moment, So it's not like the European Union, where the French and the Germans are not going to, fight anymore. They're not, the French are not going to say, well, but look what you did to us in World War II. That kind of stuff is, for the most part, forgiven and forgotten because they have a very strong the hierarchical, the European leaders, the banks, the corporations, they all have a lot of control over the European politicians. But the good thing about this is, because it's purely voluntary, so it's like with you and me we're doing the podcast, right? So we are doing this purely because we want to, right? So like there's no contract, we're not expecting anything from each other. It's just purely because, we want to do it, So similarly, and so then when you do it on a voluntary basis, it really builds trust. And that's the beauty of BRICS. And then the only thing is that then they can like enter into long-term deals, and but it's all business deals, So it's all win-win. There's but nothing to lose in a business deal. One person gets the infrastructure, one person gets the money. One person gets the oil, one person gets the money. So there's no like putting the gun to the head. There's no forcing. So I think if BRICS works out well, they could be a fantastic model for a multipolar world where countries come together on a win-win, mutually beneficial, and it's based on the respect, So it's not like, so like if you look at the U.S. and like during the Cold War, especially if one country it doesn't want to be aligned with the U.S., oh my God, there will be coups, there will be coups, assassinations, wars, bombs, genocide, like the U.S. Like installed a dictator like in Indonesia, and the U.S. Helped the genocide of about maybe 1 million Indonesians, and all because they were communists, they didn't want to give away their the gold and the diamond and the iron ore to the U.S. corporations for free. So that sort of stuff won't happen in the multipolar world, because you deal on a fair basis, then there's no need to kill one another or to stage a coup or do crazy stuff. So it builds trust.
You hit on a very important aspect of this BRICS, because I had a question for you. I think you kind of answered it already, though, because my major concern with BRICS was that it was going to become too formal. And I think there's already issues enough with formalities and hierarchies and, like you said, these binding agreements. Because I think when I think of not only geopolitics but just electoral politics, which is something that I'm so at this point people are just so disillusioned with the corrupt system, the political system. I don't know how it is in India, but in the United States, we've reached
Same thing.
We've reached a point of just hopelessness when it comes to any, like, there's no signal at all that the leaders are in the interest of the people. The leaders are in the interest of themselves. There's such a disparity, and I've talked about this many times on the forum, how the same people in Congress have universal health care for themselves, but somehow that's a bad thing when the people want health care for themselves. But they have all these incentives and benefits, backdoor deals that none of us have access to. Like, it's completely unfair. But somehow they convince people that they have our best interest and that if you vote for us, we're going to give you what you need. I mean, but that's proven to be a failed model. But I like what you said there with the decentralized aspect in a way, to where these countries voluntarily are doing this. It may be a little bit transactional, but if something needs to be done, it's done. It's like, I'm here for you in that moment. I got your back in that moment. We don't have to sign a 100-year deal about it. We just need to do it as we see fit. And maybe that does keep the powers kind of equal within the groups, because it's not about, sustaining this hierarchy. It's about, you scratch my back, I scratch your back, but let's keep it going. I like that approach. And I think that kind of answered the question and the concern that I had, because I was thinking more so with it being led by heads of state, because at the 15 BRICS Summit, you had pretty much all the heads of state there present. I guess it's more symbolic than anything, but I just didn't want to see that being kind of the legislative momentum going forward. But according to you, it's not really organized at all like that. It's not set up to where people can veto bills or anything like that. It's completely different from what we know as far as electoral politics.
Yeah. So I think, it's not a model that has been shown to work in the past, So we will see how it goes, because I mean, I see beauty in it, but we'll see, but like you said, so whenever you bring in some countries together, they're going to have some problems eventually, and but that's okay. What matters is, how we solve the problem.
Did you see? I know we touched on it some, but I just want to make sure if there was anything else you want to that you saw in that BRICS Summit that surprised you, that caught you off guard. Was there anything that you didn't expect that came out of that 15th Summit? Because most of what I saw was kind of like, we knew that there were going to be some additions to the group, and we knew that there's going to be more emphasis on the currencies, trading within their currencies.
Yeah. So the one thing that a lot of people, at least on social media, they were saying that BRICS is going to have its own, the currency, and especially the Russians and the Chinese were quite excited about the notion of a BRICS currency. And there were all kinds of speculations. Will it be backed by gold? Will it be backed by the commodities? Somebody said, hey, the new BRICS currency could be backed by some oil, some gas, some lithium, some wheat, some rice, so you take like the best of the natural resources from each of the member, and you make this like the amazing commodity-based backed currency. So, well, India wasn't a big fan of that. I think it's partly because of the US influence, and partly because they're under the false notion that BRICS currency would basically become a Chinese currency, So, but I think it's going to actually, so we don't know what's going to happen. But the Russian finance minister, just a few days ago, he said, hey, we're still working on that. So it won't be a form of like a BRICS a currency, like, like we won't like print BRICS currency from the BRICS bank, but it'll be like an account, So the way that I think of that is, like, say, for example, you go to Vegas, and you give $200, and they give you the chips, Right. So it's called the chips, or what is it
tokens,
called?
The tokens.
Yeah. Okay, so
chips, tokens.
The tokens, chips, So, and that works only within that the casino, But within that casino, well, you can use those the chips or the tokens to buy drinks, to buy food, to gamble. It's a very flexible thing, but it won't work outside. So you have to stay within the casino. And then if you want, so you can go to the cashier, and you give the chips, and they give you the dollar back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the sort of the BRICS currency that people are trying to work.
I had one question about the relational element. I don't think I've ever asked this question before. I can't understand the friction between India and China. How is the relationship? And I don't want to be too, I don't want to make a sweeping statement or be very general, but is there some sort of relationship between India and Russia? Is it a healthy relationship? What is the state of that relationship between the Modi administration and the Putin administration?
Okay, so you want both, or just, so do you want to talk about both, about India, Russia, plus about India, China, or just about India, Russia?
We can address India, China, but especially India, Russia, because I don't think I've ever heard.
Okay, yeah. So, well, India and Russia have traditionally have had very good relations. And like especially during the Cold War, well, India was more aligned with the Soviet Union. So we had a little bit more of a socialist country, and partly because of the bad experience with the British. They colonized and raped and plundered India for like 150 years or so. So, and the Russians are very good friends, but they don't try to meddle in the affairs. They're very patient. They don't try to stage a coup. They're not but demanding. Like they don't say, well, you have to watch Russian movies, you have to have Russian banks, you have to have Russian corporations, you have to drink Russian colas or Russian vodkas, But you cannot have such a platonic friendship with the US, It's like once you become friends with the US, it's like immediately comes all the demands. You need to use the dollar. You need to have Citibank. You need to have Google. You need to have CNN. You need to have all, McDonald's, Starbucks. And if you say no to one thing, you become like an enemy, And the Russians are very nonchalant. They're like, no problem. Take your time. You buy what you want. You deal whatever you want. And if well, India flirts with the U.S. or Europe, Russia doesn't get mad, So you tried that with the U.S. Oh my God, Can you imagine Japan saying to the U.S., "Hello, U.S., we love you, but we want to buy Russian."
Yeah, right.
They're like smack, So. So in that, the the Russians are very long-lasting friends, and from a pragmatic point of view, about 75% of the military hardware in India are from Russia. So, but even if some prime minister, he really loves America, he cannot like really like break off the relationship with Russia because all of our but tanks and fighter jets and guns and submarines, blah blah, most of them are made in Russia, and we need their help for maintenance and support for a long time. And then the last reason that India won't really piss off Russia is because they don't want a Russia-China alliance to be faced against India, So they have to, so they have to keep Russia reasonably happy, so it doesn't become like a Russia-China fully on against India. So there are lots of positive and negative the incentives, So it's like, hey, so I don't want to, So it's like some based on good feelings, and some based on pragmatism, and some based on geopolitical necessity.
So I think I want to encourage my audience, and I think my audience does this already. Not telling you what to do, but just consider everything that we've just discussed and just the nuanced fashion of this conversation. Even if you believe, and SL kind of established this when we first talked in episode 36, even if you're one of these people who soak in everything that the mainstream media tells you, if you took the time to listen to any of this conversation, you'd be able to say, wow, this is a complicated world. It isn't, what they're telling me isn't the same as what these people are talking about. How is Russia such an enemy? How is China and all these people such enemies if they're working with so many different countries? That should be a natural skepticism that someone who is obsessed with mainstream media, without, calling up people in my audience, but I know people who they watch TV all the time and they get most of their news from the mainstream media. But just consider that point of view, how these countries are collaborating, talking to each other. They're not coercing people, as SL mentioned, but they're exchanging ideas. They're not coercing people. And so just consider that when we talk about this country versus that country. This is a world. This is not one country versus the other. We have to look at this in a global way. We got to stop this echo chamber lens. The US is this and Russia is this and China is this and India is this. We got to stop that way of thinking. And we have to really look beyond the borders, because that's the only way you're going to really find truth. That's the only way you're going to understand that the world is in this together. There's no separation, whether you think it is or not. There's no separation.
Right. Yeah. There's no decoupling. Okay. There's no decoupling from anybody. You cannot decouple from, like if you live in the US, you cannot decouple from Mexico. You cannot decouple from Canada. You cannot decouple from China. Like you take a single smartphone, it has natural resources from like 40 countries. There are so many different metals, and you have suppliers from dozens of different countries, and we all have to work together. And we have to accept diversity, like if you say, oh, I'm so open-minded, a man can wear a skirt, I will accept it, So that's great. Then accept the Chinese version of their system, okay? Well, as long as they're not forcing it upon you, you can deal with the communists. Who cares what they are? Muslims, communists, dictators, blah, blah, blah. Everybody you can do business with, you can, like there are lots of Americans who live in China, maybe like 100,000 Westerners, they live in China. And they all have a normal life, They work as teachers, engineers, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of them, they get, married to local Chinese. They settle down, and they start to speak Chinese. Now, there is this one American woman that I follow on Twitter. I forgot her handle. But she's from like South Carolina or something, I forgot, from the East Coast. She's like blonde, blue-eyed, and she speaks fluent Chinese, and it's like so mind-boggling. She's like walking around Shanghai, showing us the place, and that's fun. The world is, like we're all, one world. So we just need to get along with one another. Because the other option is World War III. And that's the scary part, for the next 10 years, because the globalists who rule US and Europe, they are like really determined for global domination and for the so-called full spectrum dominance, and they want their way or my way or the highway, and they want everybody to bow to them, and it's a very scary notion. And this is not the way you spread democracy, by saying that everybody has to follow my rule. But that's not democracy. That's actually the opposite of global democracy, which is a dictatorship.
Exactly. I was just going to say that. That's exactly what this sounds like to me. The dictators calling other people dictators, and it's just classic propaganda. But so the G20 is going on here. Before we conclude today, I wanted to get this in. A couple of questions about the G20. again, all the original BRICS members, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are part of the G20 already, which is just, that's interesting in itself. Was that just coincidental that the BRICS Summit happened within a month of this one that's going on now, the G20? Like, how does that work out? Because I saw that, I was like, really? They're having another major summit when they just had the BRICS Summit? And mind you, the Western media really tried to de-emphasize the BRICS Summit. Hardly talked about it. I had to get access from, I think it's like Russia TV. I got some coverage from there. And was it World is One News, Wyon, which is based in India, I think. But a lot of the U.S. media wouldn't even talk about BRICS in detail. Like, it barely talked about it. But of course, the G20, is all over the place.
Oh, so by the way, I wrote a column on Sputnik about the BRICS meeting, and I will send you the link, and maybe you can post it in the YouTube.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, please send that link to us.
Sure.
But what are your impressions?
I mean, so but G20 is like based on the 19 largest GDP countries, and then one is the European Union. Oh, so by the way, the G20 just became a G21.
Oh, really?
Because of the African Union, they let it, one African Union that represents the 54 nations, I believe. So the African Union just became a member this morning of G20. So I mean, so I don't know if they're going to change the name to a G21. We'll see. But that was a good thing, because so they're now forced to open up their the clique of a group, and oops. Sorry, 1 second. I need to I would charge my
battery. Your phone. Yeah, you're good. No, while you're doing that, I was curious though, and I know you had something to say, but I had to get this off my chest and think: is the G20 set up like the BRICS, where we talked about this de-hierarchization, the de-emphasizing of the power relations? Is the G20 more like the G7 is really running the show, and then the global South is just there along for the ride? Like, how is that set up?
Exactly. So
I didn't mean to say it like that, but that's the way it seems.
Yeah, the actual name for G20 should really be G1, okay, which is the US, and but nobody dares to say anything about the US. Like they all play nice. They all, when Sleepy Biden, he sleeps through the meeting, everybody claps politely.
So sad.
Yeah, like nobody ever speaks out against the US. They're all like, the US like supports Nazis in Ukraine, the Al Qaeda group in Syria, and all the other members. They don't say a single word. So it's basically with G1 plus friends,
Yeah, that's kind of the impression I got when I brought the topic of the G20. But I wasn't sure. I wanted to give the benefit of the doubt because I didn't know a lot about the G20, and I was actually surprised that all of the BRICS countries, the original BRICS countries, were in the G20. That's what threw me off. And I was like, wait a minute, that there's already overlap, but the BRICS is obviously something different because just by the way the media portrays it, like if you watch it, the BRICS, they almost portray it as like this is a threatening body. Um, and it's bad for the West. You know, they keep emphasizing that the dollar's going to crash, the dollar's going to do this. But of course, it's not a complete dumping of the dollar. It's just simply a repositioning of the hegemony that the U.S. has over the world and the West has over the world. It's not about overtaking the dollar. I mean, the dollar's going to be there. It's just simply other people are at the table. This isn't the only currency.
Exactly. You know, so I mean, so have you heard of Ray Dalio?
I have. Yes, I have.
Yeah. So he's like a brilliant guy. You know, he's like, I mean, the hedge fund manager, or he was, you know, and I think it was like the largest, the hedge fund in the world, whatever. And he lived in China for many years. And his family, his children grew up in China. And he's written a book, and he also has you know, the videos on YouTube. And he talks about, I mean, the empires, you know, the rise and fall of various empires. And he formed a study group to study the empires over the last, you know, 500 years, like the Dutch, the Portuguese, Spanish, French, British, and then American, you know. So, you know, so here's a sad story, right? We all get old, okay? And we're all gonna die one day as human beings. And it's also the same for, I mean, the empires, you know? And all empires, for some reason, they go through the same phase. You know, in the beginning, they work hard, they have good family structure, good society structure. The government saves money, they don't have debt, but deficit, and they are very good in the education, innovation. And then they reach a top, you know, like maybe in the 1950s, and then they go, yo, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And then the society starts to decline, you know? And then you're like, oh man, I can't do math and economics, bro. I need some let's legalize marijuana because I need to. I mean, I can't handle, you know, whatever. And then, you know, like the empires become lazy, and then the societies become lazy, right? The Chinese are working with 60 hours a week. Americans are complaining about 35 hours. The Chinese are doing a PhD. The Americans don't even want to go to college, you know, bachelor's degree. So, I mean, it's just a human nature, you know. So if you look at the U.S., it's like, you know, basically the last three stages of the empire, which is a lot of debt, monetization of debt, and the internal conflict, very high inequality, crumbling infrastructure, and bread and circus, you know? So when you have all these bad things going on, the people at the elites, they want to prevent a revolution, you know? So they're like, hey, listen, there's no such thing as a man or a woman. Everybody, but you talk about whether you're a boy or a girl. So they come up with crazy things, you know. So let's legalize marijuana, you know, because the more people do drugs, the less they're going to focus on politics. So, you know, so I mean, they could change, but theoretically, but America could like reverse and to start, you know, to go back to the old days. But it's very hard, right? So the rise and fall of the empires is just the history of the human history, you know. So go back and start with the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire. Everybody does the same the mistakes, and I don't know. People never learn, and then they think it's going to last forever, you know. So like, I mean, but this is the part that makes me think that Americans are not going to solve the problem, because nobody dares to talk about the cycle, you know. So nobody dares to say, "Hey guys, we might be in trouble. We have to change our ways," you know. And it's all about, they change. I mean, why do they talk so much about China? You know, like they should be, like focused on America, because if well, America is doing great, if the American corporations are leading the world in innovation, they don't have to worry about China, you know. So you make better products, you know. I mean, like for example, like say, like we look at like with TikTok. Why can't Facebook, Google, Instagram come up with a better software, you know, that beats TikTok? And then you don't have to worry about banning TikTok, or, saying crazy things like, but TikTok is forcing the American kids to go crazy. No, it's your society that is so degenerate, right? So if you have but degenerate but kids, but drinking the detergent, or I don't know what they do, you know, it's not the problem of with TikTok. It's the sort of the kids that are growing up with no values, you know. So so it's like, yeah. So yeah, like but two things America and but Europe should do. One, fix your society. You know, but take care of your own people. So don't have homeless people, don't have poor people, don't have violent people. Fix your society. Fix the infrastructure, and then, but number one, stop the wars. Okay, go make friends with China. Go make friends with Russia. Go join BRICS. Okay, I mean, like if the U.S., if Biden calls Xi Jinping tomorrow and says he wants to join BRICS, would China say no? No, they'll be super happy, you know, because the first the requirement is but no sanctions. So okay, so come join our family with no sanctions, and we will all be friends. You know, so that's the way forward, because But all I see in, like maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But he speaks more truth about you know what is happening with the U.S. and what should be done. But a lot of the Republican candidates are like so crazy and so off a tangent. They're not going to fix the problems, because they're not even like preparing Americans for a time that the American empire won't be there. But that's going to happen, whether in but 10 years, but 20 years, maximum. Do you think that the U.S. will have 700, 800 military bases in 140 countries, but 20 years from now? No way. Okay, so the debt payments are going to be so high by say by 2040. There's no way the U.S. can afford these the military adventures, wars, and the military bases. But I don't see a single person but talking about that kind of future and say, hey guys, So this is what we have to do to prepare for the world, for the future.
You said a lot there, and I disagree with some things, and I agree with some things. I think the major point of accordance that I have an agreement is we definitely need to change some cultural elements within the United States and this Western mindset. I think the biggest issue is we've created so many different types of escapisms, and whether that's reducing social media to just the lowest common denominator, to where discourse is just like dumbed down, and that's reflective of our failing education system. We have, generally speaking, we have a poor education system in the United States. Now, some areas, the area that I'm from, I live in the 8th richest county in the country, Williamson County in Tennessee, outside of Nashville. And the public education here is unlike any other really in the country. So you do have those anomalies, but generally speaking, 54% of people in the United States have a reading level of 6th grade. So that gives people an idea. We're talking about 330 plus million people, and over half the population has a readability level of 6th grade. That tells you how. And so what do? They simplify everything with these, not just with the algorithms, but just the information, the types of conversations people are having. The level of discourse is so low, and it's mind-boggling because a lot of the people that the culture is looking up to, a lot of it's celeb culture. A lot of it is just very basic, common sense type knowledge. But somehow that basic knowledge becomes, oh wow, that person's so enlightening. But the people who actually, to me, have, I'm not going to say that they're smarter, because I don't think being smart is necessarily an indication of social class. Because I know a lot of people that I grew up with that have great minds. They just express it in a different way, but I understand them, and they have great minds in the right context. They would have a better reception in the world, but the context that we're working with is very much controlled by forces like the mainstream media. And so if your message isn't in line with what the corporate media wants, then your message is going to either be ignored, suppressed, thrown aside, because it's not the official way of saying it, because this person is too raw. They may not have the education level, but they have something that they don't have, which is an authenticity about them that a lot of people can connect with. And I think that kind of goes back to, in the political realm, you see that, I think, some with Trump. I think Bernie had that at one point, where I think that's where a lot of people gravitated towards that message, this quote unquote, this populist message, was because there was something that wasn't approached that way before. That type of language wasn't used before. It was breaking the protocols of the mainstream media and the corporate media. So I think we need some cultural adjustments. I think we need to focus more on the education, and also focus on opening our minds up more to things, because they're just such an ignorance. There are people who have never left the state of Tennessee. There are lots of people who have never left the country. So of course those people are going to be culturally ignorant because they don't have that flexibility in their mind. But I think the point that I would disagree with you with is, I think every country has particularities, and China has them, and India has them. We have these cultural things that have always been a part of the society. And I think you mentioned the 50s and that kind of the counterculture movement. You had the Vietnam protests. There was just so much that happened. You had the boycotting, the bus boycotts of the 50s, the civil rights in the 50s, and everything else going on at the same time, the Korean War. So every country has its particularities, and culturally, they're going to be responses to those wars and to those sudden abrupts of power. And I think the counterculture and the hippie movement and all that stuff that happened back in the day was a way to say this is a new society. Like, we're kind of getting out of this old militaristic way of thinking, which can be positive, but that also can be negatives, like you mentioned too, with the excess of drug culture. But I would argue that legalization of drugs need to happen in the United States for a lot of different reasons, mainly because drugs are linked to the criminalization of people in the United States, especially with the war on drugs is terrible. It's just as bad as the wars that you were talking about with the wars of aggression, the drones, and everything else. They're linked to the pharmaceutical industry. I would argue that there wouldn't be a black market if you legalized all drugs because people are going to do drugs regardless. And just full disclosure here to the forum, people may already know it, but if it wasn't for me taking marijuana during my PhD program, I would have never graduated with my PhD.
Wow.
Me taking marijuana towards the last 3 months of my PhD program, I wrote more in that last 3 months than I did the previous 2 to 3 years before that. Because someone told me, Kika, you should look into this because it will lower your anxiety level. So to me, drugs, depending on the type of drug you're talking about, they do have scientific benefits. To me, I don't see, for instance, marijuana, I don't see it as a drug. I see it as just a medicine, really. It can be. But it all has to, all these things are tied into each other. The war on drugs, which links into the policing problems we have, where they lock people off of these simple drug charges. But otherwise, they have great minds. They're great people. They're productive people, but they're being criminalized over a petty drug, or if you see it that way. But and then you have the pharmaceutical people blacking out the marijuana people because the pharmaceutical want to push their drugs on people and take out the other drugs. So, and it's tied into the criminal justice system. Jim Crow Joe has criminalized more black and brown people than people in general than pretty much anyone in Congress because of his 1981 bill that became the 1994 crime bill. So there's a lot that goes on, I think, with the drug crisis that we have that is part of our culture. But I think that there's also a beneficial side to that if we allowed it to be beneficial. But of course, the lawmakers don't want to see that side of it because it benefits them in their pocket.
Yeah. That's a good point. You know, like big pharma, it like pushes the Adderall and all kinds of drugs on kids, which is basically like cocaine and meth, and that's and I mean the opioid crisis in the U.S. was started by companies like Purdue Pharma, and those guys, Sacklers, I believe, the family, they made billions of dollars, and they were killed like so many Americans with their addictive drugs. So yeah, so like you said, well, every society has unique characteristics, and they have to figure out what works, But whatever you do, the end result should be a positive society with more prosperity, with better schools, better healthcare, better the infrastructure, better health. So like you don't have to go to the doctor. A better food.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that, and and they have to take care of the economy. So you cannot just borrow $1-2 trillion every year and think that this is going to last forever. Or the wars. Man, when are Americans going to say no to wars? You wasted trillions of dollars bombing Iraq and Afghanistan. And then people had amnesia, so they bombed Libya and Syria, and then they had more amnesia, and then they're starting a war with Russia. Why? And then some people are talking about a war with China now. It's madness. Don't do it.
Some people like and this is the thing, beautiful people. You have to be careful with these political tricks. I think the rapper Pitbull, he refers to them as politricks instead of politics.
Politics. Oh, I like that. I like that.
And he's the first person that I've heard refer to politics as politricks. I don't get involved in them. But you have Vivek Ramaswamy running around here talking this. On one hand, he's selling a message that, he's like a Trump 2.0. But to me, he's trying to antagonize China. I mean, it sounds like he's just redirecting the pressure off of Russia and just putting it towards China. So he's not, is he really anti-war, or is he just selling a different type of propaganda? It's interesting, these politicians. Then you mentioned RFK Jr. I just wish he would leave the Democratic Party. I don't know why he believes. My only issue with RFK is the major issue that I had with Trump. I think Trump has a lot more baggage. I'm not a Trump supporter personally, but I think Trump has some positive characteristics about him. And I think he could have potential positive characteristics down the road, but neither one wants to break away from the system. This is the same criticism I had before. RFK said in one of his latest interviews that they're blackballing him and they won't let any Democrats participate in the primaries. They're trying to black them off of the ballots in the New Hampshire and Iowa. But we've been trying to tell them this before. The Democrats are not going to allow an outsider that wants to change their corrupt ass system. They're not going to let you go in, regardless of you being a candidate or whoever you are. They're not going to let you go in and be a good force for the people. You have to go outside of that corruption. You can't change corruption from within. And I don't think you can. I've never seen it happen. And I think he would have to run independent. He needs to consider seriously running as an independent if he wants to change as a great force, because within the Democratic Party, they're going to try to ostracize anybody that has good intentions within that party. They're not going to let him do it. And the same with the Republicans. You have to go outside of that system, because the RNC and the DNC are going to basically tell you what to do.
True. Yeah. I mean, as I'm a big fan of JFK, so I have some special corner in the heart for RFK Jr. But like you said, he has to run as an independent. But yeah, so maybe so he should run as an independent now, and he will probably lose. But then with that experience, I think he can win 4 years from now.
But I tell you, SL, it's interesting. I know your audience is probably familiar with Jesse Ventura. He won the governorship in Minnesota as an independent. He basically said that his strategy was, and maybe RFK is playing a chess game that we don't know about. I don't know if RFK is going to join with Trump down the road. I don't have a clue what's going to happen. I think that these people know more than we know about what's going on. But maybe RFK waits to the last minute until he builds up this base, and then he's like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to run as an independent now. Now that you guys have used me, I'm going to leave you guys, and I'm going to become an independent now. Because there's nothing against him running as an independent if he doesn't sign this contract with the DNC. He can run as an independent and stay in the race all the way to the final minute. So, again, he may be playing a long ball strategy that we don't know about.
Yeah. When was the last time the U.S. had a credible third party? I think it was Ross Perot, right? 1992.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is so sad, because otherwise you're just drinking Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and you're still going to get diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to get rid of this stuff. So I don't know, as either the change has to come from the bottom up, where you have a lot of enlightened people at the bottom, or you need a really, really smart but ethical leaders at the top, but if you have but corrupt leaders and but clueless masses, it's like the worst. It's like the worst combination.
Oh my gosh, we're feeling that negative combination right now. I mean, this country is in a shambles, and it's honestly, SL, it's the worst feeling in the world. I've never had such a worse feeling than I did the last election cycle, the presidential cycle in 2020. It was a bad time to be living in the United States. Just if you don't agree with the system, it was just a terrible time. You get attacked from everybody. Like you get attacked from family. I mean, luckily with me, not so much. I mean, my family's pretty, like we're pretty close and then we don't let politics divide us. But politics have divided whole neighborhoods, whole families, and we want to do the opposite here. Like we want to completely change that sort of narrative. Don't let these political cycles ostracize your friendships and stuff. I mean, please don't do that. I mean, that's a terrible thing to allow their experiment. You're basically proving that their experiment is working when you do that. And I just wish some of my friends would kind of break away from all these chains of mental oppression and just try to reach out to people who, may have different points of view. Like that, it's a simple message, but I urge my listeners to do that. And before we leave, I want to throw in Cornel West because I don't want my audience to be like, well, Kiko, you talked all about RFK as an independent, but you're not talking about Cornel West running as a Green. Me personally, I know about Cornel West. I know him very well. I know about him, but I feel like that Cornel West needs to expand his audience a lot more because I've seen on Twitter the issue that I have with the left in the United States, especially, is that you can't just talk with each other. You have to talk to different types of people. You can't just talk to everyone in your Twitter circle that thinks like you do. And that's the biggest issue I've seen with these people who are independent leftists. You have to build your coalition. You can't be stuck in this one group. And I know you mentioned it before. You like to talk to, you follow a lot of the same people I follow, but you're not stuck. SL Kanthan isn't stuck in one group or the other. You're flexible. And that's the way you have to be, really. You cannot be stuck in a group. You can still have principles, but also speak to different types of people. What would you encourage people to do when you talk about even following people on social media? What would you give as far as advice to people to get them to sort of break away from those mental oppressive chains?
They did a psychological study on with kids. So they we took these with toddlers, but 2-3 years old, and they would give the toddler a toy, and then after 5 minutes they would take it away, and they would give the toddler a new toy, and they found that there were two types of toddlers. One group of toddlers, they loved it. They loved changing the toy every 5 minutes. And then the other group of toddlers, they cried. Okay, they didn't want the change. They're like, man, like you gave me a toy and I love it, and let me keep it for like 1 hour, 1 day for the rest of my life. I like it. Don't take that away. So I think this sort of like, like there are some people who are always like open to new ideas, So, like for me, like whenever I meet somebody from a different religion, different culture, different nationality, with different views, I'm like, wow, cool, So that's me. And then there are some people who are like, I mean, I don't want to say xenophobic, but they're like the kid from the second group. They don't want to change their views, their ideas. They like the toy that they have. But unfortunately, the elites, they play to that, and they reinforce that, and then they make the left with too extreme, and then they make the right with too extreme. Like for example, somebody in the left would say ban all police. Man, you cannot live in a society by banning all police. Let's have a reasonable discussion here. You can't be yeah. So the first thing is that if you are a person who likes to stick to the same group, follow the same people, then you may want to ask yourself, well, am I the kid from the second group who likes the same toy? Do I like to hang out with the same people, read the same the website, and do the same thing over and over? And it's not bad, right? It's just that gives more stability for people. But then well, you may just want to experiment. So just just read one article from the opposite group. Like if you're a conservative, like read one New York Times, and if you're a liberal, watch Fox News for 5 minutes. And just say, hey, so I'm going to be neutral. I'm not going to be hurt. So I don't have to accept all the views. I'm just going to listen, to see like if there is a nugget of truth, So seek truth, So don't seek comfort, because if you seek comfort, then we'll be stuck in the zone, and then the elites are, like very good at psychology. Okay, whether it's the MK Ultra or the Edward Bernays or the marketing people, they know psychology very, very well, right? So just expose yourself a little bit. You're not going to die, and but eventually you will actually start making more friends and but getting some new ideas, and it's more fun that way.
SL, I like that message. I won't go into much what you said there, but you said a handful there, because I feel like that expansion is there. Again, that's my biggest critique. The U.S. left is honestly, to me, is an absolute joke, because if you want to have a mass movement, you have to connect with the masses. So that's the one premise there. And you can use your messaging, but you have to also understand how to relate and talk to other people too, because you have to build that trust. Like you said before, it's not going to happen overnight. And you know what? The group that you're trying to reach to, or the individual you're trying to reach to, may concede some points to you. But you also have to understand that you're going to be conceding something to that person too. And that's not bad. It's called an exchange. It's a healthy dialogue, exchange of ideas. You're not going to just give people your spill, and you don't expect that person to enlighten you and give you a different point of view too. Like, it's absolutely crazy the way some of these people think. Is like they can just give you all of their views, and they're not supposed to take in anything from other people. I think that's the biggest issue with these echo chambers is and even though they may have large followings now, their following is never going to grow, I think, in an organic way, because they're going to be stuck in those same ways. And I think someone like yourself is only going to grow more and more, because there's a dynamic there that has an international spirit about it, to where it has a great base, but it can only build from that base, as opposed to being stuck in a corner. You may be able to get to the other side of the room, but you can't leave the house. And I think you have to have a strong base to grow. And I don't think that the left in this country has a big enough base because they're not tapping into the elements that they need to tap into to grow it even more. And a lot of that has to do with communicating with different types of people. You have to open yourself up. Otherwise, it's a lost cause.
Exactly. Well said. Yeah.
But are there any final words that you have for my audience? I'm going to link your Sputnik article for sure. I didn't even know you wrote for Sputnik. But are there any last words you have for my audience? It's been a great conversation in this episode 57, SL.
Thank you so much, Kiko. No, so I don't have a wonderful thing like fractions I had last time. So the next time I will think in advance for a good catchy conclusion. But the nice thing about our chat is it goes all over the place, right? So it's kind of but tricky to find a summary for our conversation. Just with 360 degrees. Okay, so that's the word for this chat, right? With 360 degrees. It means liberal, conservative, left, right, east, west, past, present, future, but 360 degrees views. Okay, so don't be stuck in, the tunnel vision, 5 degrees, but 10 degrees. But the world is open, so let's have a 360-degree vision.
I
How
like
about
that
that?
a lot. I love that. I love it. It really is. We have to stop this the labeling stuff. I honestly believe at this point there's more counterproductive than productive. And if you're not going to live up to those principles that you set for yourself, then you have to stop like with the labels. I mean, the labels are just, a lot of people don't even understand them. But I think if you just talk to people and tell them your views, there is a lot more commonality than people realize. But you have to open yourselves up and talk to people. It's just that simple. And that's what I would say about that. But I love the 360 view because that's what we try to present here at the forum. Even though we may have our own principal views, you have to be able to reach those views to a larger audience. And that's what we're trying to do ultimately. You can follow SL on Twitter. That's how I found out about SL Kanthan. He's a real person for all the naysayers and the haters out there, because there are plenty of them, unfortunately. But I've enjoyed this episode 57, and Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum, can't wait to have you back on. It's always a great time, and I've learned so much from you, and I know my audience learns a lot from you as well.
Thank you, Kiko, and it's always a pleasure chatting with you.
No doubt. Beautiful people. We have a lot of great guests coming up down the road. Subscribe to Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum on YouTube. We also have a podcast version on Spotify and your favorite podcasting platform. But encourage people, friends, and family to spread the word about this forum. And also SL Kanthan, subscribe to him on Twitter. And his Substack is dynamic. I'm going to link his Substack, Twitter, and his newest articles as well in this episode description. Have a great day, beautiful people, and we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Kiko. Bye.
Bye-bye.